Hi, Marianne here. Welcome to the Restoration Activation Project video commentary series. I'm glad to have you here with me. In the last couple of videos, I was addressing sexuality in the context of the self-mastery awakening process. And in today's commentary, I'm going to be looking into a few different technologies that are being used, have been and are being used to keep consciousness, human consciousness, regressing. All right. Now, with regard to the last video, I want to make a couple of more comments because they also tie into today's topic. First of all, sexuality being used as it's a technology being used to keep consciousness regressing. Okay, and in the last video I was looking at various ways to begin addressing and learning to master your own sexual energies, because that sexual energies are just as important in terms of self-mastery as all the rest of your energies, your thought energies, your emotional energies, your creative energies. These are your creative energies. Heart center and heart and mind, but also sexual energies. And whether or not you can relate to the theory that I introduced as to how the current mind-body complex came to be as it is in terms of the reproductive organs and the sexual organs, whether you agree with that or not, we need to start looking at various ways to address that situation in a consciousness progressive way. All right. So I was looking at various ways to start doing that. And one of the ways that I touched on was by, first of all, when you feel a sexual urge, determine the source, where it's coming from. Is it truly your own urge that came up within you, or is it an urge that may have been tweaked from an external force? And I recently made a video in terms of the different ways that entities can mess with us. And so maybe it was an external tweaking. I know that that's something that's been used on me. So look at that. That's the first level. Is it your own, or has it been externally imposed? And that takes some real discernment in a lot of cases. It's not something that we would normally even think about. We just think our thoughts, all of our thoughts and all of our emotions and our sexual urges, things like that, we always assume they're our own. But unless you are really in touch with and in tune with your own thoughts and feelings and your own body, I mean intimately, then it's very easy for these entities to mess with those aspects of ourselves, with those energies. So looking at that first, and then you can start looking into, what was I just thinking or doing, particularly if it's an urge kind of out of the blue. What was I just doing? And now I just feel overwhelmed by this urge. So that we can start pinpointing the underlying belief, which is a distortion, so that we can really get to the root of it. The point being, it's not about sexual repression, but really getting conscious in the way we express sexually, taking complete self-responsibility by learning to master that energy instead of allowing that energy to be master over us. There's a big difference. And some various ways that another key way to address this is to look at what we are taking into ourselves that is influencing our sexual behaviors and sexual thoughts and things like that. What are we taking into ourselves? Of course, obviously, if you're taking in pornography, that's going to keep you focused on sex. If you're reading, sexually focused material, things like that, any sort of media that is sexually focused, okay? I mean, that's obvious. But there are some other ways that we're taking in distortions around sexuality. And just one among countless examples of that would be just watching a regular movie. There is hardly a movie out there, modern movies, that doesn't build in this. Even if they can always bring sex into the plot somehow or another, even if it doesn't serve the plot. But sexuality is just brought in. It's put in our faces, whatever we're watching. And it's always done in ways that somehow debase sex. Because remember, sex, the energy of sex, the energies around our sexuality they're a lesser form of creational energy. And for more in-depth discussion about that, I refer you back to the prior two videos, Sexuality and the Self-Mastery Awakening Process, parts 1 and 2. But it's just a lower form of that, a lesser form of creational energy, all right? And so in these movies, even non-pornographic movies, sex is constantly being debased. In, for example, like it's just, someone for a few minutes, you go to bed together. I mean, non-responsible sex, that sex is equated with love, and not even real love, but this false notion of love that's been promulgated through various forms of conditioning and social engineering and so forth. But it's just debased. So just a regular movie can be a source of that. Another source of potential influence in terms of your feelings and behaviors around sex is, what kind of conversations you're having about sex. Let's say, for example, you're hanging with your friends, or maybe, at the water cooler at the office, and sex comes up, and it's always in a joking, debasing way. Women or men are being objectified, being looked at as sex objects, looking at body parts, focusing on that. I mean, what are you exposing yourself to? Particularly if it's on a regular basis. And you might not even be thinking about these things, but you're taking them in. If you're not consciously aware of and choosing something different, then you're taking it in. You're taking it all in. Okay? So what are you taking into yourself that is influencing? And these are all, if you're not mastering your sexuality, then your sexuality is mastering you. It's that simple. As in any form of consciousness, if you're not consciously observing and choosing, for example, which thoughts you will follow through on or not, which feelings and emotions you'll follow through on or not. In other words, responsible, self-responsible for the energies that you're bringing into through this mind-body complex into the world, the energies that you're creating with. But sexual energy is no different. And there's been all sorts of programming around that, for example, that a lot of it, I'll use men first as an example of some of the programming, and then I'll talk about women too. But some of the programming that does come through in movies and things that you read, and conversations with people that are in the collective consciousness, okay? But that, one of the first and foremost is that as a man in particular, your sexuality defines you. And this is why so many men who, for whatever reason, go through periods in their life or or they struggle with impotency, impotence, they're devastated by it. Devastated. And yes, that would be, I'm not saying that wouldn't be a challenge in your life. But if you allow one aspect of yourself, one energy within yourself, if you identify with that's who you are, so to speak, then that's a big distortion. That is ego identification and attachment. Same thing with women. And even though that's changing, their programs, the social conditioning, social engineering programs are constantly changing. As they progress through they get what they need, or they're fine-tuning, the general programs change with that. So that's constantly moving and changing too. Watch movies from today and then watch some movies from, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Even though back then they also they were using, media. From the time movies came into being, they were immediately latched onto as a means of social conditioning and engineering. So, but particularly in today's movies and even in the past, men and women, sex is nothing. It's just what you do. It's what you do. So has that worked on you? Can you look at yourself and go, that's kind of how I feel. If I have an urge, I need to release that. I need to allow that urge to be fulfilled with no thought as to the potential consequences of that. And I'll say again, this is not about repressing sexual energy. It's about learning to master it and to address it from a consciousness progressive standpoint. And to be fully self-responsible, particularly when that sex act involves someone else. And again, look back to the other videos around that. But and this isn't easy. It is not easy. It takes a great sense of present moment focus and awareness. And there's different ways. Short of sexual release, those energies can be redirected in the process of learning how to master them. You can play with this. perhaps you have a really strong sexual urge, get up and take a walk. You know, the old take a cold shower business. But, and some say that that doesn't really work anyway, that that can make things worse. I don't know. I'm not a man. I don't know. But, you know, particularly with men. But run around the block. Experiment. The point being learning to master it instead of letting them just control you. Boy, I got to find a way to go take care of this right now. But it takes real strong present moment awareness. Another thing that can be done with sexual energies in learning to master them is to literally use those energies towards creation. A consciousness progressive creation. A literal creation. Go sketch something. Play with, if you've never done that before, really seriously consider different ways to use this as a creative release. And then another step you can experiment with is literally transmuting that energy. Doing energy work. When that energy arises, don't suppress it. Don't suppress it. Feel it. Experience it without acting on it. And intend that you choose consciously to transmute that energy into higher order creational expression. But experiment with all these different ways. Experiment, experiment, experiment. Because if you're serious about progressing on this journey, then sexual energy is no more or less important in terms of self-mastery than any other energy. In fact, in some cases, particularly if you feel you might be addicted to sex, it's really important that you start learning how to master that energy. And if you need help doing that, get help doing that. Because you are impairing your own progress if you don't. Now, so the tie-in here between this discussion and what I'll be getting in today is the very fact that sexuality has been used since however long you think this body's been this way as a means of manipulating us and working with our genetics. And what do I mean by that? When on a consistent basis, you have the same range of thoughts, the same range of feelings, the same range of behaviors, like I said, on an ongoing basis, that literally alters your genetics. Read up about epigenetics. Do your own research on that. But we have been steered, engineered to alter our own genetics, and not just around sexuality, but in other areas as well. For the ongoing, consistent purpose of keeping our consciousness suppressed and regressing. But we are altering our own genetics, which ties into the way these beings and the ruling class, and I'll put a link to that article too, very important article, the beings that make up the ruling class that basically pull the strings in our reality now and have been for millennia. But they know these things. They know. And they use these things against us because they're able to do that because we don't know. And again, this is to people who are on this journey of awakening, not the general public, because everybody's here for a different reason. Everybody varies from one person to the next. But those of us on a conscious journey of awakening, we have some common ground. We are all here. And I speak about balance a lot. It's so important. The process of consciousness constantly working to keep itself in balance. Consciousness progressive and consciousness regressive, finding that balance. And that is achieved through its expressions, you and me. All of the different expressions of consciousness are the means by which consciousness seeks to balance itself. And if you're on this journey, your baseline purpose is to bring balance back into our reality. Our currently predominant consciousness regressive reality, we are here to bring balance to that by functioning through consciousness progressive consciousness in our own unique ways. That's unique purpose. The ways that we go about that. But the baseline is to bring balance. We're here to bring more consciousness progressive consciousness into this reality. And that occurs through our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. This is how we create. This is how we bring that consciousness into this reality. Okay? So we have been steered for millennia to be altering our own genetics. And this has been achieved, like I said, through their mind conditioning, social engineering programs throughout the millennium. And these are constantly being upgraded. As they progress in their understandings of how we work, so do their programs shift and adapt. Plus, whatever new items they have on their agenda, the way they keep going about this. And there's it's particularly frantic and chaotic right now because we are coming to the end of these major cosmic energetic cycles all around the end of this specific evolution cycle, conscious evolution cycle. We're coming to an end of that. We're poised and flowing into our next evolutionary cycle, or I should say cycles, because there will be various timeline splits and different, reality splits and so forth. But I don't want to get into that right now. But just, we're on the cusp of that. In fact, it's already happening. It's not like it's just going to be a light switch that's flipped. So that's happening. But they know that by steering us and keeping us in a certain range of thought, feeling, and behavior, that over time alters our genetics. And the reason they have us do it goes back to their deep understanding of the workings of the principles of creation and the way consciousness works, the inherent conditions of consciousness, the baseline duality, consciousness progressive, consciousness regressive. They know these things. And they know that by getting us to regress ourselves, they make themselves like one step removed from the direct, immediate consequences of that, because we're doing it to ourselves. And yes, they have tampered with us, but by and large, the tampering that's gone on, genetic tampering, both energetic and particularly physical DNA, it's always done in cooperation with humans. Certain humans have worked with them to make us available to them for these experiments and for these alterations. So that on a technical level, we've agreed to it. That's how they justify this to themselves. Well, you all have agreed to this. And for example, in viewing pornography, in viewing movies that are extremely violent, that desensitize us to violence, that debase sexuality, that encourage turning to authority rather than ourselves, rather than being responsible for ourselves, looking to government or your religion. And of course, there's a religion of money, education system. Instead of taking responsibility for ourselves. But all of these things are traps of agreement. In other words, we're consenting to all of this. It's all that is being done to us by default. You know, we're not consciously saying yes, but by watching, by supporting government, by participating in various religion and dogma, the dogma of government, the dogma of religion, the dogma of education, we're consenting to this. We're doing it to ourselves. So, we must take ego out of the driver's seat, keep tuning in ever more deeply, opening yourself more and more to the knowledge and capacities, the higher order stuff of core self, and quit looking anywhere outside ourselves for the answers. We, in order to claim ourselves to be sovereign, there's a lot of talk about sovereignty in various online communities. Lots of talk, lots of lip service given to that. That's something we have to, yes, we were created as sovereign beings, but we've been given that away over the millennia, turning it over to somebody else by looking outside ourselves, looking to someone else for answers, to take care of us, to tell us what we need to know. And we have to earn that back. The right to truly reclaim our sovereignty, we have to earn that. And we earn it back by, first and foremost, becoming masters of self. Mastery of our energies, our thoughts, our feelings, our sexual energies, our creative energies, all of that. And what we're bringing and how we are creating in this reality. Full responsibility for that. And it sounds intimidating. And it can be intimidating because of all the conditioning. And, you know, because we have been altering our own genetics, and I'm talking in terms of the conditioned rather than the actual tampering per se. This is how, from one generation to the next, we become more regressive. Because we're taking on the consciousness-regressive genetics of the generations before us, some of us, a big part of us, not all of us. And we're passing them on to our children. And with each generation, the ruling class get better and better at social conditioning, mind control, social engineering, as well as genetic tampering. Better and better and better. The two go hand in hand. And that's just why we can look and see. If you live long enough, you can look at different generations and see the downhill slide. It's very apparent. Now, tied in with not just energetic alteration of genetics, but actual physical tampering. Shortly after World War II, the ruling class partnered with various races, off-world beings, to begin a specific type of tampering. And you can look for more information around that. Look to my, and I'm going to put links for all this below, but a deeper look into human and human template origins, and I cover some of that stuff. But they look to various sectors of the population, military families, indigenous peoples, to begin a specific focus of hybridization, of a specific type of genetic hybridization. And I've also talked about how they've injected their own and various other races of beings' genetics into us. Mammal, reptilian, in some cases Draco genetics are there and coming to the forefront. We see a lot of violence around the world, a lot of craziness. Some of these genetics are being triggered, or when they were within certain people, they don't become active. They don't activate until a certain age or physical condition comes into being. But again, look to the other videos. But this particular genetic manipulation project was centered around creating a particular type of human hybrid. And in the last video, this is related, I talked about what the ruling class are always trying to suppress and regress within us. I talked about our 3 inherent energy centers. The amazing mind center, the beautiful heart center, the unfathomable capacities of our creational center, and the fact that we have all 3 of those. And what was added to the mix, that many of these races, they may have had them, or may have had some variation of all 3 from the beginning, but because of the way they regressed, the heart center wasn't very strong. So because of the way they were progressing, their different veins of consciousness evolution were more consciousness regressive. If they had heart center at all, it began diminishing and diminishing and diminishing because the focus was all around mind and technologies. And that's why there's such a focus on technologies. It's all mental. It's all about the mind. And technology is consciousness progression to these beings. They don't like the heart center energies. They see them as, well, in some cases, some of them covet this, but the ones that are pulling the strings, they don't want it around because they have seen the power of it, and it doesn't take them in the direction they want to keep going. They do not want the heart center to be a part of this. So the genetic engineering that's gone on since World War II is basically around that, not only activating, and some of these hybrids have been called super soldiers, but mostly not. Most of them are just various people being born in as the generations proceed through the timeline. But less and less heart center capacities. And not only because the heart center is the source of the energies that enable us to experience and act through real love, real self-love, real true caring about ourselves and others, and true compassion. Not only because of that, but because those energies in combination with mind center energies and our creational center energies, when those three are aligned with the intention of consciousness progressive evolution, we have what is known as, drum roll, a conscience. A conscience. Our own inbuilt, the original full human mind-body complex, excuse me, that is still accessible today, is a conscience. And they don't want conscience. They don't want us to have a conscience. They want us to be like them, as above, so below. Conscience was our inbuilt, self-regulating of our thoughts and feelings and behaviors. That's how we self-correct quickly. Conscience. And so, and these characteristics, lack of conscience, lack of compassion, it's not limited to the various younger generations. There's plenty of this going on in older generations too, but particularly in the younger people of today, millennials and younger. And again, don't hear that I'm saying they're the only ones that have these characteristics, because they aren't. But it's becoming more and more apparent through them and their behaviors. For example, the way wars work today, wars are always horrible anyway, from any perspective. But today in particular, the members of, military, and not just special forces, but also regular service personnel, and then just the general population as a whole, some of the younger generations. What do you see? Less and less true compassion and caring about anything or anybody other than what they think the way things should be, what they think they're entitled to. And again, these things show up in other generations too. But look at all the movies, most movies, the vast majority of movies that are out there are geared toward younger people. Video games too. It's extremely violent, extremely sexually oriented. Just making sex like it's nothing. It's something that we do, for sport or whatever, or we're bored or whatever. And again, these characteristics, these behaviors are not limited to these younger people. So don't go twisting my words around that. But there is a definitive focused programming working these people. And if you do much observation of people at all, look at this generation, and there's a flatness about these people. Yes, they still have emotions, but they're very service to self, consciousness, progressive oriented. Me. And there's, like I said, you have to be really tuned into energies to start picking up on some of this stuff. But this is why it's so important to learn about your energies and experiment with them and get familiar with them and master them. Because unless you do that, you cannot know. You can't see and you can't come to know what is really going on, either in yourself or the reality around you. So there's been a particular focus around this particular human hybrid. We're all hybrids. We all have some mix of something in us. to some extent. But that's been the focus around this particular project, because they have certain things in mind for some of these beings, and they amplify their inbuilt, perhaps dormant, higher order capacities and use them for distorted purposes and in twisted ways that they think are all, they can justify to themselves because they have a certain agenda in mind, and because we are, quote, doing it to ourselves. And in the case of these particular genetic experiments, we're talking about humans working with these beings, intentionally working together. And the humans that agreed to this would tell you that they're doing it for what they believe is the greater good of humanity. And again, I'll get more into those specifics, but they all justify this. You know, they know better than we do. They're going to fix this and do this to a certain percentage of the population so that we're all safer, we're all better taken care of. So I got a little bit off track here, but that's important information. So we, getting back to altering genetics ourselves, know that. Do your own investigation around that and come to understand at the deepest level possible. Keep looking and keep seeking answers. How we're doing it to ourselves. All right? Now I'm going to take that into the technologies I'm going to talk about today. Other technologies besides sexuality and using sexual energies. Here's another quick little side trip I'm going to take about around sexuality, and that ties in with my theory that the way we are now was the result of genetic engineering and external engineering, as well as us contributing to that on some level, either through our behaviors consistently or whatever, but primarily external, I believe. No, don't believe, have a sense of that. I don't believe anything. But if there were some in the original full human mind-body complex, some version, even though we didn't have these organs, I have a strong inner sense of knowing that we did have. There was a special means, a particular way of connecting with another for the higher purpose, specifically higher order creation, and that experience would be beyond comprehension to you or I, that would make today's sexual experiences, even the most incredible ones you've ever had, couldn't hold a candle to this. And it wasn't about physical organs. Our bodies were completely different. Nothing, not very much at all like they are today. But two mind-body complexes coming together in a unique way. Yes, I believe there was some form of sex, if you will, but this powerful interchange, merging, play upon each other, dance with the energies that we can't even imagine. And today's sex doesn't hold a candle to that. So I wanted to throw that in because I meant to include that last time. Now, getting into the technologies, the other technologies. The first one I'm going to touch on is the dream state, which is an inbuilt technology that was part of the original full human mind-body complex as a mechanism for self-rejuvenation. When we were in the non-waking state, a means of rejuvenating and restoring the mind-body complex on an ongoing basis. Self-healing. allowing the body to rest and heal itself, ongoing. But it was also a mechanism for, even in the dream state, enabling us to, our consciousness, to venture into the other densities. You know, not just fourth density. We are in native fourth density mind-body complex. Not just fourth densities, but the fifth and sixth densities, and the various dimensions and realities around those densities. Different timelines. All of this we could do also in the dream state for purposes of ever expanding our capacities for consciousness, progression, evolution. Okay? And the dream state as it is today, both through our own contributions to this, whether genetic or behavioral, or it's a both, and not taking responsibility for ourselves, self-mastery, self-responsibility in every area of our lives, in every aspect of ourselves, full responsibility, that our abilities and access to various other densities, dimensions, and realms, and so forth, in the dream state, drop down. Now, by and large, there are some exceptions to this. I would not say that this is across the board, but for most people that are in the dream state, only have access to fourth density and very low consciousness regressive realities within that fourth density. Okay? That is completely overrun now by consciousness regressive beings. All shapes and sizes, of all sorts. They're the masters of that realm. And so now we don't even have access to what we originally had access to. That can be regained as we begin making real progress in our work. All these things will come back to us, or they will be restored. And in addition to those restrictions, and plus two, we still do another purpose of the dream state was to help us resolve subconscious issues, bring those into consciousness in the dream state, much more efficient than doing it in the waking state, but always about keeping ourselves in balance, being in balance within ourselves, so that we're always in the purest state possible for being able to create through consciousness progressive consciousness. Okay? And at a glance you would think, well, if these beings and entities could mess with that, why didn't they just take that aspect away? Why didn't they work to diminish that mechanism built in to the mind-body complex? Well, why else do they keep things? Either they don't have the power, the technologies to do that, or they have figured out ways to use our own inbuilt mechanisms to their advantage. And by that, in this case, I mean accessing us in the dream state through these lower fourth density beings who take us through extremely violent or terrifying or debased sexual experiences in our dream state, all for the purpose of generating from, because even in the dream state, we are experiencing and reacting too. And we're more vulnerable if we don't take certain steps, and susceptible to all of these consciousness regressive goings on around us, and reacting in ways that perhaps we wouldn't in the waking state. But all that energy, they're literally feeding on our energies in that state by eliciting certain emotions and responses from us while we're in that state. Another way that they use this mechanism to their advantage is, when we're nearing the end of various major cosmic energetic cycles and coming to the end of a conscious evolution cycle, poised to go into another one, and they're trying to collect as much loosh, the ruling class, as they can right now. They're frantic. That's why so many crazy things are going on right now. They're really working triple time to elicit these energies from us for their own purposes, because they know there's a possibility that they may not be in the driver's seat in the next version or versions of this reality. And so they're taking what they can get. And some of these beings and these off-world beings that have been messing around with us are leaving, but others are just waiting to come in should we not regain mastery and take back control over this reality. And even those that intend to be around for the next cycle, even if they do get back in power, all of the energies that they're taking from us now, they're either feeding on or harvesting for other reasons, using to try and, quote, improve their own genetics and so forth, some of them. They'll just be that much more ahead of the game when we get full-blown into the next cycle. So one of the ways that they use dream state, not just the other ways, I mean, they're harvesting that energy from us as we're terrorized or involved in perhaps some perverse sexual fantasies and scenarios that they stage for us to lure us in. And this is one of the ways that the alien love bite unfolds. And I speak to that in, I think, the first Sexuality commentary. If not, it's the second. But anyway, check that out too, because dream state is a very important tool in that process, where they're literally trying to take control of two people who typically have very powerful, that are coming to the forefront already, psychic abilities, various energetic capacities that they want to study, they want to get to the genetics behind that, and they want to use in their own way, that have nothing to do with these two individuals that are involved. And they use the dream state to stage various scenarios in which the consciousness of these two people, they maneuver it so they come together and have these powerful sexual experiences together, reinforcing the fact that they were meant to be together and so forth. And they don't even know what's happening to them, but it reinforces this connection between them, this forced connection between them. And their sexual scenarios are staged too, not necessarily with the two of them together, but sometimes with other beings, perhaps with a reptilian or some other entity. And it's all towards that purpose, harvesting, feeding of energies. And beyond that, another way that they use it, if you're not an alien love fighter or dark side of Cupid person, you haven't had those experiences, but just the average human being, they use the dream state to put us in these frightening or very sexually powerfully motivated, sometimes perverse sexuality, violence, to not only take the energies in, but we all know that if you wake up in a certain mood, frame of mind, even if you don't remember your dream, or even if you can, you connect it to a dream and you go, wow, man, I got to shake that off. But unless you take steps to literally do that, to clear your energies, then guess what? You carry those energies with you throughout the course of your day, meaning that those are the energies that you're creating through. Those are consciousness-regressive energies. And they know this, and so it gets carried from dream time into waking consciousness, which keeps the cycle of consciousness regression going and going and going and going, just like the ever-ready bunny, round the clock. So start paying attention. There are ways you can master the dream state. Yes, you can. And I can help you with that. There are various steps and things you can do before you go to sleep and when you wake up and even throughout the course of the day to make sure that core self is in the driver's seat, not ego, and that you are learning to master your consciousness and awareness in the dream state, or choose not to have a dream at all. You can do that. You get really good at these energies, you can also do that. But again, I can help you with that. But it's really important. Start paying attention. You can start keeping track of your dreams too. And I can show you how to do that. And it's really important because you can see if there are patterns. Dream state, another way they use dream state, one more thing, is a means of, let's say, for example, you've been working on clearing a particular distortion. Maybe that distortion is around what you're eating, your diet, or perhaps around your sexual energy. You've been working with things, or your physical fitness, or your job, or whatever, or relationship. You're working on clearing distortions around one or more things, and you've made progress. Well, when we're in the dream state, if we're not either lucid when we are dreaming and consciously aware, or we've chosen to take ourselves out of dreaming and just sleep without dream, and yes, that's possible, then when we're in that dream state, we can, because we are drawn into certain scenarios, we are seduced into various scenarios, maybe a thought is injected as we're drifting off, that vulnerable beta state between waking and dream state consciousness, very susceptible at that point. Injecting certain thoughts that, okay, we will have a dream about this or that. Whether or not it's something we would consciously choose or not, and then seducing us into that dream, and using that dream, that staged dream, to get us to agree to go back into consciousness-regressive behaviors that we've been working so hard to step away from. That trap of agreement. By participating in this dream. And sometimes, they even can have you sign something while you're in the dream. Be really aware of that and watching for that. But you're consenting on some level in that dream state because of the scenario you're in and the manipulation that's going on. That trap of agreement. You are consenting, even if it isn't consciously aware consent. So that's another way they use the dream state to accomplish their goals. All right, now I'm going to move into chakras. It is my understanding, my own sense of inner knowing and research and all of that, that chakras are not inherent, innate within the original full human mind-body complex. They are a technology that came into being at some point after the original mind-body complex was created. And chakras are a technology that came from some very, very ancient races, one of them being the Hagas, I believe. Now, most of you know this, but I'm going to go ahead and say this because some of you might not, that chakras are energy centers. They are energetic implants, not physical implants, like a little piece of metal or something that some of the, perhaps alien abductees experience, that kind of thing. No, they're energetic implants. And they're located, if you have them, in particular areas of the body. Now, for those of you that are really getting agitated by me saying that they're not native to, they're not innate within the original full human mind-body complex, hang in there, bear with me a minute. And remember, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm presenting information to you to help you keep expanding your awareness for purposes of progressing on your journey, for enabling you to more fully transduce core self, to fully restore this mind-body complex to its original full human, whole human state. And the information that I present to you is not just, it's based on a combination of document research and books and writings and teachings and all of that, to the greatest extent possible that there is information to be had around these things, in combination with thinking, critical thinking. What is my heart center telling me? And what is my creational center telling me? My inner knowing, my intuition. All of those things come into play. And that's the only information that I present to you once I have come to, over the course of time, really doing all these things, running it past inner knowing, all of my research and all. But that's where it's coming from. And whatever I do present to you, I'm not here to convince you of anything. In fact, I don't want you to believe anything you hear. Don't believe me. Don't believe anybody else. Keep tuning into yourself, your core self, your own inner knowings. Watch me and listen to me as the third-party observer. Step outside of yourself. Don't take anything in. But the whole point of the information is to get you asking questions, to stir your own inner knowings. Okay? So I know a lot of you aren't liking hearing this about the chakras, or chakras, depending upon how you pronounce it. But they came into being from these ancient races and were introduced as religion. This is first and foremost because they came through religion. Common sense, for me, makes them a little suspect. I know what energy centers I have in my body. I know I have a mind center. I know I have a heart center. And I know I have a creational center. Inherent to me, to this mind-body complex. And my first exposure to chakras was when, early on, when I had one of my very first awakening experiences. It was such an intense experience that my immediate response was, I need to know more. I want to learn more. I want to become more aware. I want to have deeper understandings, yada, yada, yada. And of course, I ended up being pretty quickly seduced. Only after about a year. I had a year. I was doing my own investigation, but was sort of getting frustrated by it. You know, I was looking into all areas, not just religion and religious texts and all that, which I'd been doing for a while anyway, but science and every angle, and I just wasn't finding stuff. And finally, I met a few people, and I was sucked in, seduced. I allowed myself to be taken into the New Age groups and modern spiritual communities. And this is where I first started experimenting with what I thought I was inbuilt were chakras. Well, first of all, I didn't have any sense of them being there. And I've always been very physically in tune with this mind-body complex, particularly, not just from a physical aspect. I've always been a very physically oriented person, but I'm talking from an energetic standpoint, very highly attuned to that. And I never, it's like when I started trying to work with them, I just didn't ever have a sense of them. But I realize now that in trying to work with them, I had ended up creating them, or some version of them within myself. Remember, they're energetic things. And those that work with them, those who work with them, would tell you that, and the teachings around them state that they're supposed to further enhance our capacities to become, quote, enlightened, and to energies that were meant to help us in that process, to help keep us clean and purified and ever expanding and opening our energies and so forth, okay? Those are the teachings. Well, first and foremost, it never felt natural to me. But I tried working with them, and in inducing them and creating them within myself, I even experienced a sense of energy boost, and started experiencing those energies in myself. But again, it never felt natural. It always felt forced to me. But then as I moved further along this journey, I started asking more and more questions, questioning everything I was doing, everything I was using, every process I was working with, experimenting with. I started questioning everything. And the deeper I looked and sensed into inner knowing, the less, or I should say, the more suspicious I became of chakras. And ultimately came to the place, it's like, well, we have these incredible 3 energy centers. Why would we need anything else? Wouldn't that be superfluous? But what I came to discover, even more than that, was that an experience for myself that these energy centers, they're not just energy centers that we can work to expand or manipulate or contract. They are energy vortices. And what that means? That beings that understand and have the technologies to do so, this is just another way they can access the template and the mind-body complex. And yes, they could also, some of them also know how to access the mind and the heart and the creational energy centers. So, but why would we need more access? More energy centers when we had these 3 basic centers? Powerful. We didn't need anything else. But what these vortices do to those who would abuse them and use them to their advantage against us is it gives them more specific targeting. It enables specific body area targeting, more finely tuned. Because when you have chakras within you, whether you believe there's 7 or 12 or whatever you work with, there's subtler and subtler versions of these that go into, it starts getting more and more specific, if you will, to various areas of the body. And again, for whatever reasons it came into our mind-body complex, it has been grossly abused with some people. I would say with many people. As a means of accessing the mind-body complex and the template as well. So I ended up cleaning and removing my own. And am I suggesting that you do that? Not on your life. If you know you're meant to have and work with these energies, and you know at the core self level of knowing, your deep, inner, intuitive knowing, that these energy centers, these chakras are helping you progress on your journey. Use them. Work with them. Keep working with them. It's your journey. It's your life. But if you did discern and come to a place where, like me, you just feel they're not right for you, they're not something that you were meant to be working with in this version of yourself, and that you can have some suspicious experiences in terms of perhaps maybe a sudden, inexplicable body ailment, or mood or energy swings and things like that. Vortices enable that. I mean, that's just greater access to us. So really question, look at this for yourself, and you determine if this is something that you wish to remain in your mind-body complex on this journey and continue working with. And should you decide that you wish to remove them, it needs to be done in a very self-responsible, consciousness-progressive fashion. And I do not recommend, again, it's your journey, you do what you like, you do what you choose, but I would not recommend that you go to just any old body and have somebody else remove them, because more often than not, they're not getting actually removed or removed in a responsible way, and they're just getting shut down, which means that an entity who knows how to do that could reopen and regain access to you. So, your decision, your inner knowing, use it, work with that to start taking back full self-responsibility, mastery of your own body to the greatest extent possible. And that entails looking at every aspect of yourself, every tool you're using, every process you're working with. And the technology of chakras is among them. Look. Figure it out. Now, the last technology, and the chakras, again, those came through, knowledge of those came through some of the Eastern religions and philosophies. Again, the Hagas. And this ties into the next one, which also came from and is related to the Eastern philosophy, which is sort of it's a version of the fifth principle of creation, the cause and effect. Okay, but that's got, there's other stuff around the karmic interpretation of that. Okay, that doesn't necessarily align with the true principle of cause and effect. And it can be distorted. But this ties into the next technology, which is reincarnation. That is a technology. And in my understanding, it is not a technology that was innate to our reality. It was an overlay. And here's, in a quick nutshell, how I came to that place. Again, using the means that I spoke to a few minutes ago as to how I address information that comes to me and work with it, and how I come to my understandings, and that process in a nutshell I just described. In going through that process, well, first, what sort of led me to, in addition to just always investigating every aspect of my life, whatever philosophies I was looking at, everything, just really, really taking it apart, unpacking it on every level. But in first learning about it, it was interesting. I was very curious about it and the possibility of that. And I came quickly to understand that, wow, I understand this is going on. Even though I've never had conscious remembering of past life experiences. And some of us that are here now aren't necessarily beings that have been caught in the reincarnation wheel. Some of us have, some of us haven't. And as fascinated as I was, I never, ever, to this day, still do not have a sense of having experienced that. That doesn't mean that I haven't, but I feel that if I have been caught up in that process, that it hasn't been through very many cycles. That's just my own inner knowing. And there are many people right now, more than ever, having past life memories are coming to the surface. Not just through regression therapy, but in conscious waking consciousness. They're having memories. I dare say that some of those memories have probably been implanted. They're conjecture. They're not necessarily real, but particular ones chosen to elicit certain states of mind, certain beliefs, certain emotions within the individual that serve their purposes, not the individual's. But this ties in also to the Akashic records, and how even if such a thing really originally was a part of our reality, I don't sense that either. But even if it was, it has definitely been corrupted. And where do most psychic readers get their information? When they're talking to someone? You know, if you're going to a psychic for readings, and there are people that can access the Akashic records, if they really exist, or they could just be implants into that individual so that they relay certain information. Remember organic portals and how people can be used to get to other people? Doesn't mean that the psychic doesn't have inbuilt capacities, because he or she most likely does. Now, there are frauds out there, but many of these people have real capacities. I mean, we all have an array of capacities. And so some of them are, quote, legitimate. But that doesn't mean that they're on a conscious journey of awakening, and that they aren't really looking into, that maybe, they don't know about entity interference and things like that. And they aren't even aware that they're being used in that way. So, and that the information that they're accessing is more than likely corrupt. Because even if the Akashic records were inbuilt to this reality, then that information has been accessed and can be tweaked and engineered in such ways so that when the psychic accesses it, it's distorted. It's not true. It's a bunch of BS. So that goes on too. But getting back specifically to reincarnation, and the reason, the deepest level reason that I question it being a part of this reality in its original state is because why would we need reincarnation in terms of doing the balancing that we're all doing? That we're balancing within ourselves, between ourselves, as expressions of consciousness, balancing itself, keeping itself in balance. And one of the ways we do this, I mean, the key ways, let's look back at what we really are. Core self. This mind-body complex, even if created by other beings, because that's who creates. Beings create. There's not a God creating. We are the creators. But this mind-body complex was engineered to transduce core self with the specific intention of creating through consciousness progressive, expansive creation, forward-moving creation in physicality. Okay? Going back to core self. What is core self? What comprises core self? Myriad versions of itself. We're just one version, one expression of core self in this reality at this time. So, with the balancing process in mind, we have all these different versions of ourselves working in the balancing process. There are extremely consciousness-regressive versions of ourselves, extremely consciousness-progressive versions of ourselves, and a plethora of versions of ourselves in between those two extremes. So why would we need a system wherein we keep coming back to the same reality over and over and over and over again? In the course of when we already have these natural processes in place that facilitate the balancing process. Okay? So, in my study of reincarnation, that involved reading buku case studies and of people who had had afterlife experiences. In particular, I looked at a number of afterlife experiences as a whole, but in particular, was looking at those that had experienced, gone through what they knew in that experience before they came back into their mind-body complex, that their experience was centered around the whole reincarnation thing. And that from the moment they saw the light, they begin having certain types of experiences, very much in common, this intense energy that just overtakes them. Sounds very technological to me, not pure potential vital energy source. It's different. Because if you have ever experienced core self, nothing compares. Nothing. But they're taken through these experiences and this process designed to really to elicit certain feelings of awe. And yes, there are those who have afterlife experiences that are just horrible, but I'm not getting into those in this talk. Let's just talk about the, quote, positive experiences. But they're all very clear, and the way they describe things, this is a system. They go through various steps and stages. Some of them even described it that while they're waiting to meet with counsel, I'll get back to that in a minute, but they have, it's like, wow, we were helping to put souls in bodies. What? But this sort of a, what's it called? This sort of a conveyor belt process where that's what they did. And it's like, does that sound natural to you? That when we go up after consciousness leaves this mind-body complex, that if our whole focus is about becoming self-responsible, we are our own authority and source of knowledge and beingness. And that doesn't mean that we don't learn from others. I'm not saying that. But that all of a sudden now, somebody else is in charge. Okay, you know best. How is that different from what's going on down here in 3D reality? Nope, we just turn over, we just assume because this person tells us they're a being of light, or they can present themselves some appearance that is in tune with your distortions, whatever beliefs you've carried with you, whatever false beliefs, whatever distortions you didn't clear before your consciousness leaves this mind-body complex, you take with you, and they work with that. So if you were a Christian, they work with those concepts. If you were if you worked with Zen Buddhism, they use those concepts and those types of figures that they show to you. Whatever you carry with you, whatever distortions, that's what they use, honey. And so those are the scenarios they present. But what these case studies had in common, a common thread running through all of them, was this counsel. That at some point they had to meet with the council, come before this group of elders or beings of light or whatever, who were going to do a life review. Okay, we're gonna look at you now, which ties in to various religions. Christianity, kind of the Judgment Day thing. Various religions. Anyway, I don't need to get into that. But we're going to review your life here. And, oh, look, this was good. This was good work, what you did. That's excellent. But over here, they always got back around to, and of course, we've all done consciousness-regressive things, but things that they know would work on that person. But it's like, you could have done that better. And if you come back in, if you choose to come back into another body in another lifetime, then you can work through those issues. It's another chance to work through them. You'll see how far you get. And as long as you're there, you can also be addressing some of these things that you did, 8 lifetimes ago. And of course, you have no knowledge of what you were doing 8 lifetimes ago. And they know this. So they could make up anything. Anything. To make you feel bad enough, knowing which beings still have conscience. And most people, they're in such awe of the settings that they're seeing, of the light and the color and all these tools and technologies that these beings are using as part of this reincarnation system, this technology, to all these people, to bring them to a place of awe and, oh, these beings, they must know what I'm supposed to be doing next. And so what do? Because that's the way they've been persuaded, even though they're not saying, I'm telling you to go back down. Because remember, the trap of agreement, consent, they want to make sure it's our decision. And so what do most people do? Of course, they agree to go, yeah, I want to make that right. But even though, again, I cannot say in all cases because that wouldn't be true, but in the majority, and I would say all the case studies that I read, even though these people experience various incredible energies and the sense of timelessness and various things, these are all things that can be created by these beings. They think about how advanced they are technologically. And I forget who said it, but advanced technologies to someone who's unaware of them look like magic or something to that effect. People can be sucked into thinking, oh my God, this person, this being must be, I must listen to this being. They have to know far better than I what I should be doing next. Okay? So, in all the case studies that I read, what I was going to say, despite all these incredible experiences and their awe and their being totally bowing down to this so-called council of light beings or elders or whatever terms came into their mind based on their own belief systems, their own distortions that they carried with them at the time of their temporary death or their state of death before they came back into the body. Not one of the case studies I've ever read said in particular that they connected with an energy, a being that they knew to be core self or soul. It's all about these other beings. It's not about, because inner core self doesn't directly have anything to do with the reincarnation process, other than the fact that that version of you is going through that. It's a balancing act. Remember, high order, higher density beings that are truly benevolent do not interfere. And reincarnation, what is it but an interference? It's not something that's being done directly through. There should be no middleman or woman between you and core self. That is you. So what's this whole reincarnation thing about? How can it be natural? What I suspect in my inner knowing, the understanding where I am now, is the reincarnation overlay came into being after we had, or were nearing, if we hadn't already regressed fully into third density, third dimension from our baseline original fourth density, fourth dimension perspectives and capacities, that even if those who devised it initially told themselves and believed that this somehow could help humanity, okay, maybe if we keep putting them through this, they'll get it. And it's what, but how arrogant is that? That is extremely service to self, because it's interfering with that individual's journey, that version of core self's journey, by imposing this technology. higher order density, truly benevolent beings do not interfere. Sometimes they tweak things so that there's an intervention, a sign, and sometimes they choose to speak to you when you're in the dream state. But it's very rare, very precious when it happens. But they're very cautious about the way they do it. Also, the way they would present themselves, who you think you'd be interacting with, and so forth. Because they're responsible. They're taking responsibility for their actions and behaviors in these interventions. And that's why they're so careful about the type of interventions they choose. And more often than not, it's these little signs. Is it seeing the butterfly, a message in a fortune cookie, whatever. They're extremely careful about how they do it so that they are not interfering, just little tweaks here and there to let you know you're still on track without dropping a brick on your head or something right in your pathway that does affect your journey directly, like the beings that work through interference do. Those are the kind of things, like this whole reincarnation thing. And again, a lot of you probably don't like hearing that. Well, I suggest to you that the more off-put you are by information of this nature, the more you need to question why. If you truly have a deep inner knowing around reincarnation, then why would I have to say bother you at all? And why would you not, or why would you be disturbed at hearing it? Third person observer. It's like, this is somebody else's understanding. Why should that upset me? It's just information. But if you have a deep, emotionally disturbed response, then that's a signal that you've got a distortion around this. You've got some belief or ego attachment, identification. You in some way identify with this understanding because you had it for a long time. You've been working with that notion, the dogma around reincarnation. It's a part of your identity. And so you knee-jerk reaction, negative, because ego is like, no, don't you dare look at this. Don't you dare don't even consider it. Well, that's about as shut down from a consciousness perspective as you can be. And the psychological term for that is cognitive dissonance, where there's at a deep level, you know there's something to this, but you refuse to look at, much less acknowledge even the possibility that there could be something more, something completely different out there in terms of your understandings and beliefs around something like reincarnation, just as in one example. So really look at that. And I think this is, on that note, I'm going to end this commentary. And in the next commentary, I'm going to be looking at several techniques and strategies that you can use to amplify. You know, you're investing effort and you're working on your conscious journey. You're working with energies. You're looking at relationships. You're looking at videos like this. You're working. You're investing your energetic currencies of time and attention. You're working this process. And they're, the techniques and strategies I'm going to share with you are all about amplifying the results that you get on your investments of time and attention. In other words, getting optimal return on that. And I've got some fabulous techniques and strategies that will help you do just that. Okay, so until next time, keep plugging away. If you need, I'm going to have a number of links below this video that are related. And if you haven't already, I hope you'll subscribe. If these videos are working for you and you're reading the articles and all and they're helping you, please subscribe. And if you subscribe at my website rather than on YouTube, then you get access to my articles too. You get notified as they come out. So, and if you need help or you know someone else on this journey who needs someone else's help to help them regain and get back on track, I hope you'll contact me. And sometimes we just need somebody to talk to about this stuff. I mean, it's hard enough to talk about sexuality, but sexuality in the context of the conscious journey of awakening, how many people can you talk? I mean, for most people, there's not a bunch of people we can talk to about this. Which brings me to another video that I'm going to be doing in the not too distant future about people who are experiencing that sense of aloneness in this. Some are actually experiencing loneliness, but even those who aren't are feeling very alone in this. And so I'm going to do a video about that. But anyway, stay tuned for next week's, or not next week's, the next video. I don't know when it's coming out. But next video, the next commentary about the ways that you can really get maximum benefit from the time and attention and energies you are devoting to working on this process. Until then, take care.